Saraswati Nrutyatu Vachi Me Sada. Very good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen, friends at this session. I'm privileged to have four eminent panelists, scholars of their and champions of their various specific subjects. With three references, I'll try to set the narrative, and then we'll, in a very conversational and a very informal way, tend to bring out some suggestions, solutions out of their scholarly experience of decades. Every Indian, every average Indian, every morning, once he or she gets up, wakes up, and puts his or her foot on the earth, there is a shloka that our Vedas, our scriptures have trained us to chant every morning, and we do so. And here it goes. Samudra Vasane Devi Parvatastana Mandale Vishnu Patni Namastubhyam Pada Sparsham Kshamaswame. I want you to reimagine the humility of the people of this region. Ladies and gentlemen, it says, it apologizes to Mother Earth, considering her as the wife of Lord Vishnu. The Indian would say that Samudra, the ocean, are your ornaments, and mountains your body. O Goddess Earth, please forgive me. I apologize to thee as I set my foot upon you, and I'll walk upon you during the day. So that is what this region, this specific region, stands for, and this is what the importance of Samudra is for us, the maritime, what we are all here to reimagine and reconnect. At the same time, I would like your attention on the attitude of the same Indian on what we feel about waters. While having bath, he or she would take some water in the palm and would chant another shloka. Gange cha Yamune chaiva Godavari Saraswati Narmade Sindhu Kaveri Jalesmin Sannidhyam Kuru. Meaning all the above mentioned 7 most pious rivers of India, the waters may accumulate and combined come into the water that I am holding in my palm, and as I throw upon my body, it will purify me. So with this humility, this beautiful combination of humility and attitude and approach, India, this region, the Indian subcontinent, has been designed by nature, by our geographical, historical, and cultural forces over centuries. So once again, we will try in the next 1 hour to reimagine the maritime routes of the Indo-Pacific. As Ambassador Bhatia very nicely put it, the 9 states, and if we reimagine, we are all about doing reimagining here. So please reimagine along with me. I did so while I was doing my preparation. Reimagine the map of India like a human face. So from year to year, from Bengal to Gujarat, the 9 states that enjoy the maritime beauty create a beautiful smile, and which comprises of more than 60% of the GDP. So the commerce of culture and the culture of commerce, both are and have been very vibrant since centuries, since the Vedic times. And the most popular culture, the mainstream cinema, Indian cinema, has also now acknowledged how it's being reimagined. Superstar Akshay Kumar of Indian cinema has come up with a movie called Ram Setu. In the movie, he tries to establish and prove that the Ram Setu between India and Sri Lanka more than 7,000 years back in the era of Rama, was a man-made structure. So with that narrative, I would throw the first question to Dr. Lalatendu, Mohapatra. Sir, please throw some light on the archives, the historical, and eventually the cultural connects that have been prevalent with India and the rest of the Southeast Asian countries since ages, in particular with reference to Odisha, which is your core subject.
So far the archival materials are concerned, most of these materials are in European archives, especially in the archives of Netherlands and England, and also in French archives, because they are all the traders, the companies who traded with India, and they have left us a huge resources of materials for the historians. But still, one thing I would like to say that those do not set complete pictures of Indian maritime activities, because they are all official records. So they speak only about the company's activities. So they do not speak about the the totality of the maritime pictures in India. So very often their records are also little bit biased. They themselves are biased. So that is the archival resources we have. But apart from that, so far I am talking about my own state. We have a rich cultural heritage so far these maritime activities are concerned. We have so many folk tales, so many songs, so many proverbs, which establishes our connection with countries like Sri Lanka, Indonesia, and Malaysia, and also Burma. For example, one particular fruit, that is cashew fruit. Cashew fruit, it is called differently in India. It is called kaju in North India. In Bengal, it is called hijli badam, this kaju nuts. But in Odisha, it is said Lanka ambo. Because ambo means, it is mango. Because they believe that this particular fruit or vegetable has been brought by the Portuguese from Sri Lanka. So that's why it is known as Lanka ambo. And so also, even chili. Chili is in Odisha and Bengal, it is called Lanka. But in northern India, it is called mircha. So, because it is also believed that they have been brought from Lanka also. And there are also many literatures and many also oral traditions in Odisha, which speaks of Odisha's maritime contact with Sri Lanka. And apart from that, every year in the month of Kartik Purnami, almost all the Odia's people, they float a miniature boat in the nearby rivers or ponds. After bathing themselves, they float their boat by chanting a song, Akama boy, Panogua khai, Panogua toro, Masiko dharma moro. As it was just shown in the dance performance, the Akama boys. So in this way, many such memories and the clearest example is the Bali Jatra, because this Bali Jatra is celebrated on the full moon day of Kartik, the day when this boat floating is celebrated, and this is also known as Boita Bandana in Odia. So these types of memories are still preserved in Odisha.
Thank you so much, Professor. So one reimagining that comes out of Professor's responses. So far, we all know about the Bali Jatra, which is one of the largest public festivals of Odisha. But physically, practically, there could be a possibility There is a possibility actually wherein the Indian Navy and along with the Indonesian Navy and help of the rest of the ASEAN and BIMSTEC countries, navies, could do a joint cultural exercise. They do a lot of military exercises together, but a cultural exercise wherein genuinely a boat could start on this Purnima and could reach Bali, and there would be a reciprocal performance happening in Indonesia to celebrate maybe Katak Jatra. So, see, we've already started, the pitch is set. I would come to Sifra. You are representative, a scholar of one of the most widespread communities across the world, and also a scholar on diaspora. Indian diaspora has been very vibrant over centuries now, both in cultural and commercial aspects. How do you would like to evaluate and suggest on the diaspora's role to help reconnect and reimagine the Indo-Pacific maritime routes?
See, I mean, first of all, I'd like to thank Asian Conference for inviting me for today's program. I've been doing a lot of diaspora work, writing, and when Gateway House did its Indo-Pacific paper, I did the paper on diaspora in the Indo-Pacific region. Now, I found that there are actually 3 waves of migration. I mean, everyone talks about, Professor has talked about the very ancient ties between the Indian subcontinent and Southeast Asia, Ceylon, Myanmar. And that kind of cultural influence, of course, is what we witness right now with the dance. It comes through dance, it comes through language, it comes through ritual. Even a country like Indonesia, which is predominantly Islamic, they do follow. I mean, one of their currency notes had an impression or an image of Ganesha, along with the education minister of that country, basically because Ganesha is viewed as the god of knowledge. So we have these sort of threads which we need to draw out, but this is a very early influence. Then we have the medieval migration, but what we know as people of Indian or ethnic origin today are essentially those who went to these regions during the colonial period, who are sort of have got connections or family connections with the subcontinent. So in this conference today, we are talking about all the soft fluencies and that we have between India and the Indo-Pacific. But I think where diaspora is concerned, Indian diaspora has to be viewed from 2 parts. One is the old diaspora, which is, I would refer to, are recognizable as Indians because they've gone during a later period or the colonial period. And one is the NRI Indians who are going there to this region, like Singapore, Indonesia, and Ceylon, and basically for IT people who are going there, IT, commerce, lawyers. So India has got a soft bedrock of power because of the similarities in culture, the old diaspora community and the new NRIs who are reviving Indian culture there. So I think we have a great opportunity, and would you like me to talk about what we can do to leverage, or maybe at a later point? So very briefly, I mean, I think what we can do to really engage, and I think the Ministry of External Affairs and the Indian government is already doing that because they realize that we've got this really strong soft power. Sorry to use the word soft power, but there it is. But we've got this really strong diaspora with connections to India. Of course, they are foreign citizens, but we try to engage with them. Yes, we are trying to engage with them through culture, religious pilgrimages. But I would say more effort needs to be made in terms of education, where those students come and study in Indian universities, and our students go there to study. And especially with the new private universities that we have coming up, And I feel that this diaspora or these communities are an important cultural bridge, you know, understanding business ethos. Because after all, why did India go there and why did the Southeast Asians or East Asians come to India? They came for trade. So I think a cultural ethos and understanding is important for any kind of trade really to happen. And I think Indian communities play an important role in that.
Thank you so much. As you very touched upon very correctly, Indian community which ventures out of the country to the other countries are basically and eventually they turn out to become employment generators, majority of us. So that is one thing that is a great catalyst for a great medium of spreading the Indian culture, and why Indian culture, the Indian textile, Indian cuisine, the languages. The best example would be the number of words added to the Oxford Dictionary in the English language in the last 300 years, which are from Indian origin, would say a lot to that. So yes, we are a very open-minded diaspora. We go to some other country and we try to be as beneficial to that country without compromising our own core culture. And that makes a great combination wherein we can reimagine and it will eventually help us reconnect. Coming to Ambassador Sumith, you had an elaborate experience on the BIMSTEC group of nations and especially India-Sri Lanka relations. How would you like to comment upon, and how do you see as the vision for the next 10, 15 years, a decade or 2 decades, how we could all together reimagine the maritime routes? What are the initiatives we could, innovative initiatives, creative initiatives we could touch upon?
Yeah, thank you. I am very much fascinated by the Sri Lanka, then Indian Ocean, especially Bay of Bengal, historical connectivities. I think ample literature is available. Most of these literature are sometimes historical narrative, like Mahavamsa, the great chronicle we have, then Dhatu Vamsa about the Orissa Sri Lanka connections. Then we have Chula Vamsa, and then we have a great chronicle called Pujavali and Rajavali. Now, these things are there, but I normally look at the historical perspective on a scientific basis, backed up by the archaeological and anthropological evidences. I think one distinguished archaeologist, Indian archaeologist, is K. Rajan, has done a wonderful study on India's maritime relations and Sri Lanka. For me, I don't have any problem, because I always say that the regional integration and cooperation in the Bay of Bengal, let us start with the Bay of Bengal, is a matter for rediscovering our common heritage. Now, this is where we are at the moment. Since morning, I think we are trying to rediscover our common cultural heritage. Now, while you are doing that, I think we also need to learn how do you read the past. That's important. That is where I little bit differ from the written historical narrative. Because in written historical narrative, there are problems, because the author's view is the predominant view. This is where we have a serious problem with sometimes interpretation of bilateral relations between India and Sri Lanka. If you look through Mahavamsa, there are problems. Now, Sri Lanka, I'll come to Bay of Bengal, but since the audience is not aware, Sri Lanka as an island nation, of course, centrally located in the Indian Ocean, so centrally located in the Indo-Pacific, had very vibrant cultural relations between with Southeast Asia. Especially, I think the best time of these relations were between 11th to 12th centuries. And Parakrama Bahu, the first, and Vijay Bahu, the first, these were the basically kings at that time. And similarly, at the same time, I think the Coromandel Coast and Sri Lanka had lots of interactions, trade, migration, and the well-known Sri Lankan archaeologist Shiran Dharanegala commented that 7,000 years before present, there was the visible landmass between Sri Lanka and India, South India. And Mante was a very important trading post. Then Godavaya, which is the Hambantota, the current, the largest port, was a very important interport. So Sri Lanka had a lot of trading activities. Between 1,300 to 1,500, there were visibly, there were 5 trading networks in the Indo-Pacific area. One was the Bay of Bengal, then Java network, Zulu Sea network, the 5 were there. So it was integrated. In a way, the Bay of Bengal and Southeast Asia was, all these things were integrated before the post-Westphalian system came. For me, the integration in cultural integration and trade integration, whatever integration that you see, I think I'm very hopeful. I'm very, very optimistic because I look at the whole question in rediscovering the common cultural heritage. There are, I mean, we can talk hours on that because the experiences that we have between, I mean, language, you said, language, you also said language. I think the entire entirety in South Asia and Southeast Asia, including India, the Prakrit was the oldest form of the language, and then Sanskrit, the purified form. So there had been a common substratum in Prakrit. That's how the languages developed over the years. Right, we can come back always.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, and I really thank you actually, very diplomatically. You, along with optimism, have put light on a challenge, which also Professor touched upon, and that is because of the advancement in science and technology, we have eventually come to know that there are some discrepancies in the archaeological and the cultural history that has been taught to the Indian generations so far, and there are some corrections need to be made, and we are all optimistic about it that eventually we will make sure that the truth comes out, the truth prevails. At the end of everything, it all narrows down to vitamin M, money, commerce. So, Nilanthi, you are from Indian origin, based in USA. So you have this eagle's eye view on this entire Indo-Pacific activity. How would you like to, and I would like you to put some light on, through the lens of trade, and how could we analyze and strategize eventually so that we can make, the governments could make some concrete policies, because borders and boundaries are a political, my nation, your nation is a political term, but when it comes to culture, it's more like air and water. How will you divide a language? So it's a very tricky area. How would you like to help out, and what do you think could be done?
Thank you. That's an excellent question. I'll share some personal views on the topic. Yes, I very much am an outsider looking at the region, and it's a fascinating region, and I think it's just become more dynamic.
You are an insider who is outside right now.
it's a really excellent question you asked, because I think we can think about it on a few levels. In terms of politics and connectivity, we've seen politics hurt connectivity, essentially with the 1965 war, where experts will talk about the Bay of Bengal and the waterways, how trade used to flow really since ancient times. And so we saw politics and war really halt that immediately. But now, though, in recent years, we're reimagining what essentially was the past, what has been since ancient times. This period of this lack of connectivity is really the aberration. This is the exception to history. So, so in this sense, politics can also help connectivity and aid connectivity. And we've seen in the last decade of India's relationship with Bangladesh, essentially, as that relationship has gotten closer, we've seen policy progress in terms of connectivity, signing the coastal shipping agreement, exploring opportunities for the use of Chattogram and Mongla ports, actually conducting, just over the summer, some recent trial runs to actually see what some of the connectivity would look like, and really start to practice that. So as a result of some of these developments, such as the land boundary agreement being signed, also in the international arbitration in resolving the maritime dispute between India and Bangladesh, and also international arbitration resolving Bangladesh's maritime dispute with Myanmar. Essentially, that has helped free up the possibilities for connectivity and more trade. And to mention a point I want to build on, we're talking about the Bay of Bengal. I think it's important, when I look at the Bay of Bengal from the outside, I think it's an important source of strength as we're thinking about the Indo-Pacific and looking at the Indian Ocean side of things. Really, the engagement of international legal mechanisms that's the foundation that upholds trade and connectivity to take place. So the fact that you have India and Bangladesh peacefully resolve their maritime disputes in international legal mechanisms and accept the decision and move on to pursue actual progress in terms of advancements of connectivity. I think that is a strength that maybe doesn't get a lot of attention, but looking at the Bay of Bengal and especially contrasting it with some of the more contested waters in the Pacific, like the South China Sea, where there was a maritime dispute, but China did not engage with the Permanent Court of Arbitration on the Philippines dispute. So I think you can really look to the Bay of Bengal as a highlight and an aspect of this region as we're talking about culture and we're talking today about culture and trade and connectivity. That is an aspect that really speaks highly of the region, and it's really a model to the rest of the Indo-Pacific.
Thank you so much for your views. Very important, something that comes out of this is that the 9 basic states of India, which have maritime relations with the rest of the world, it's not just the sole responsibility of the central government. The state governments also could do a lot by themselves in terms of engaging universities with the centuries-old Southeast Asian countries that they have had cultural links with. Of course, a lot of it has been done already in terms of Nalanda and other universities that are doing wonderful work. But at state level as well, for example, say Gujarat, because all 9 states have different languages, different histories, different cultures. They have had their different varied, vibrant empires, and they all had one-on-one relations with either the Middle East or the Southeast Asia, Sri Lanka, the southern states. So yes, this is one thing that comes out of this Samudra Manthan, this 2-day Samudra Manthan. This is the first Ratna that's coming out. That there is a lot of opportunity, and there's a lot of optimism and hope from the state governments to take the initiative further and revitalize their historical, cultural ties with the other countries that they have always had. Thank you so much. One question I would like to ask with your permission to myself, and will like to answer that, because as a part of my cultural journey, got the opportunity to spend a decade as an integral part of Indian Council for Cultural Relations, ICCR, both half the tenure, half the decade inside as a regional head here, and a cultural representative abroad. A very important initiative of ICCR, if most genuinely and correctly pitched, has immense and miraculous potentials. And that is the Indian government or ICCR offering the scholarships, fully funded scholarship to the foreign nationals. Almost all the Southeast Asian countries, BIMSTEC countries, enjoy the wonderful, fully funded scholarship provided by Government of India and conducted by MEA, eventually coordinated by ICCR as the nodal agency. And the scholars, the students who come to Indian universities to do their UG, PG, PhD and postdoctoral research studies are actually our cultural and academic ambassadors. So when they go back, and I'm pretty sure we have ambassadors, Ambassador Bhatia, Ambassador Das, who would vouch how beneficial these alumni of ICCR become to the embassies and the consulates of India in accredited countries. Because we've seen ICCR alumni students becoming prime ministers of some countries, or business tycoons, or renowned academicians. So this is a wonderful potential, a great opportunity. And again, the state, along with central government, in communion with ICCR, could create a wonderful synergy. Now that we have the MEA, Ministry of External Affairs, has also been able to compile a list of all the alumni of entire ICCR period since last decades. And we were amazed to know that some of the students who came and studied in Indian universities are at the top of their professions in their countries and are always friends forever of India. So, yes, we complete the first round and we still have some time. Thank you so much for being so brief, and we have 10 more minutes before we make the forum open for the audience to one very quick response. Again, I'll stick to the words because we don't have much time. One thing that you would reimagine, and we'll stick to the word for all four of you, about reimagining. How would you reimagine the archival or the historical corrections being made about the history or the maritime history of India, which will eventually help and create a new reimagining?
Yes, I think there is a strong prospect of revival of this both trade and cultural relationships between India and all the Southeast Asian countries and Sri Lanka is there. Because you see, one of these a very pertinent thing about the Indian trade was, it was always meant for the common people. Common people of both these regions, they are benefited by this trade. Indians were exporting very coarse textiles and also the food grains, which were consumed by the people there. So this prospect, because now also with the growth of the IT sector, now every common man is using this IT services. So there are also countries like South Korea and also in South Asian regions also. They can make investment in India to grow it in all the IT hub cities. That is just one of these examples. But there are also prospects in other areas like food processing and also in the steel sector and also the minerals also. It can be revived. And also in tourism sector also, because you see in Eastern India, it is a Buddhist heritage hub. So according to an estimate, every year 3 million Buddhist pilgrims comes from Sri Lanka to Eastern India, especially to Bodh Gaya and Bihar. So this can be also channelized for the further improvement of tourism in this area.
Thank you so much, Professor. Very rightly said, two most important, especially for BIMSTEC and the Southeast Asian countries, the Buddhist trail, tourism trail, and the Ramayana tourism trail. If these two are initiated with full vibrancy, it can create wonders. A lot of positive steps have already started. The annual Ramayana festival that happens, which invites and compiles because if I'm not wrong, please correct me, there are more than 730 officially acknowledged and documented Ramayanas across. And it's not just India, but it's the entire ASEAN stretch, which have their own distinct Ramayanas, the versions of Ramayana. So with such connections, we could reconnect. And yes, very rightly said, Professor, when we reimagine or try to set a policy or the new narrative, the top level should be people to people, common man to common man. It has to be CM to CM, eventually coming down to PM to PM. So, very rightly said, because it starts with person to person, and then it's eventually the empires that see their benefits in joining or creating strategies. Sifra, how do you reimagine, very briefly?
How do I reimagine the Indo-Pacific and the connections between all the countries of the Indo-Pacific? I think at least the Bay of Bengal region, as everyone has mentioned, is actually, as she mentioned, is actually an area of peace, and relative stability. So all the connections that did happen in the past, right from trade to people, to culture, to religious synthesization or syncretism, everything, language, art, literature, is happening now. But I would really reimagine actually moving away from colonial narratives, going back to, as someone suggested on this panel, that I think you suggested, having these voyages being reenacted. Because if you go to see, we are looking at everything really from the top, but if you go along the coast of India, you see the same shipbuilding techniques, okay? You could use parallel sailing like the Chola Navy did to go across to Southeast Asia, really as, as a demonstration, and then have a cultural fest on that side. So I think we need to go to our indigenous shipbuilding techniques, arts, look at our local or native archives. I don't like to use the word native, but our indigenous archives. And move away from the colonial narrative of global trade, because intercoastal trading or intracoastal trading in this region is still very active. We need to pull out those threads, and we need to really sort of amplify it. That's the way I would imagine it. Education, I would emphasize again, is a very, very important way of leveraging soft power. And a lot is happening on the education frontier. And I liked your suggestion about offering fully funded scholarships for international students, other than those from the BIMSTEC region. So I think that we have a really vibrant, but how do we sort of channelize it and put it out there. I think tourism is, really need to up our tourism game, not just religious tourism, but even along the coastal region. We need to really get out there and sort of promote our even private and top universities and draw students even from the US and the developed nations. And I think that we need to go have a relook at the archive and really change our lens and see what our traditional artists and arts, they also have a living legacy and a written legacy which can be explored. And we have scholars who are doing that. But it just needs to be highlighted and amplified.
Thank you so much. Very well said and very well pronounced. One very important cultural ambassador of India has been since 2015, the IDY. And this is my personal remark. The International Day of Yoga has created wonders in taking the Indian ancient, it's like yoga for all, the slogan as it goes. And I'll also like to club the vision statement of ICCR, taking India to the world and bringing the world to India. In this case, while we talk about taking India to the world, the International Day of Yoga today has done marvelous job. It has created so much of employment in the ASEAN and BIMSTEC countries, wherein I know some of the sports teachers who came down to India, did yoga courses, and now are today so many celebrities in these countries, in our neighboring countries, in our friendly countries, are taking up yoga as their regular exercise routine, because it is one that gives peace for body, mind, and soul, all three. So, please.
No, I forgot to add the most important soft power of India is the film industry. So we do know that, even in the early days, even in when the Indian film industry actually began, that even films without any voice or whatever, Indian films would travel to Southeast Asia and this region, and they were appreciated. They were mostly mythological films, but they could appeal to this region because of the themes. So I just wanted to put that out there. That's all.
Some small-time television channels who were on the verge of bankruptcy in Indonesia, somebody suggested them, because the entire film industry, the biggest production house of Indonesia, film production house, are Indian origin, our own Sindhis. So they said, why don't you go to India, acquire the rights of some popular daily TV soap, and today these TV stars are Indian TV stars, the Mahabharat, the new Mahabharat, or the Balika Vadhu, if I may name so, actually have become cult after being dubbed and retelecast in their own countries, be it Vietnam or so. This is, of course, yes, a popular culture, but so far so good. Popular culture, that is especially the entertainment media industry, has been independent and having standing alone tried to create its significance and spread Indian culture in whatever, if we actually think that is the Indian culture. But yes, it's official that after the national anthem of Indonesia, the second most popular song in Indonesia is still today, Kuch Kuch Hota Hai. So that says it all. Ambassador, very quickly before we move to the audience, how would you reimagine?
Yes. When I said earlier that we should engage in the process of rediscovering our common cultural and other heritage, I do not. I'm not saying that we need to go there. What we need to it is to first identify what were these common cultural heritage, And that common cultural heritage essentially will have to be brought forward according to the current socio-economic and political structure. Well, we are living in the world with the most advanced technologies, whether it is a warfare or airwaves or anything. I mean, we have the best technology. And so that's the Reimagine. How do we do that? I mean, number of suggestions were there, basically the tourism and then yoga, then these are part of, all these things didn't come from the sky. Those were products of intense human engagement between the people. For example, now the microlithic tools identified in Terai region in Tamil Nadu, and some of the microlithic tools found in Sri Lanka, entirely similar, typologically similar, technologically similar, but this goes back to 48,000 BP to 5,500 BP before present. So this is the intense interaction between South India, Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka as a maritime hub, how it interacted with Southeast Asia. Now, if you understand that, it is very easy for us to project how do we do this, reimagine and reconnect, given the current parameters of economy, trade, shipping, IT, and everything. I mean, this is not very difficult task. That is what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Very well said. First, let us clear the picture. And then, based on that new, clear, confident image, reimagine what the future would be for the Indo-Pacific maritime routes. How about you? How do you look at it?
It's a great question. You had mentioned the Northeast Indian states. Excuse me. Some research that I've done on the Brahmaputra River Basin is an idea that comes to me. Essentially, that this river, the Brahmaputra, it's the 5th largest river in the world by flow. But when you look at other river systems like the Amazon or the Nile, they have water management schemes, water management agreements. But the Brahmaputra does not. And you have some of the most important stakeholders of that river. India, China, Bangladesh, Bhutan is also a stakeholder. The river doesn't travel through it, but it is a stakeholder of the basin. So that's one idea that in terms of, we're talking about reimagining, ambitious goals. Can these countries get together and try to come up with some sort of a water management agreement or accord, even a memorandum of understanding, starting at the most minimum. I was very grateful in the past week to travel to the Northeast to visit Guwahati, and I heard there really grassroots level perspectives on the river, the erosion, the flooding that takes place, but also the source of life and culture and inspiration that comes from the river. And there's been some policy progress. I think in India, the Inland Waterways Authority has declared the Brahmaputra as National Waterways 2. So there's definitely been some progress in terms of trying to envision a scheme where these rivers, at least downriver, is navigable, benefiting the Northeast, benefiting India and Bangladesh relations. So I wonder if now is the time. India is acceding to the presidency of the G20, and the Prime Minister has talked about setting an ambitious agenda on the global stage, and you think about the impacts of climate change. Also China and the US have recently decided to restart climate talks. This is despite the significant competition that takes place between the United States and China, and we have the backdrop of COP27. So is this a time to reimagine the types of connectivity that can take place with the Northeast Indian states in the Bay of Bengal and come up with some sort of water management scheme, whether it's a formal Brahmaputra Basin Commission Or maybe it's something like just a memorandum of understanding. Or even below that, just having some dialogues where all of the river stakeholders get together and scientists can conduct exchanges and visits to each other's territory. But I think we need to start imagining that.
Very important. And it's a direct compliment to the organizers of this wonderful confluence that this is the right time to set the narrative, to put the pressure on the policymakers and request them that along with historical and cultural and trade and commercial, even geographical reconnection is as important as it should be. Thank you so much, all four of you. And we still have 10 minutes to have some food for thoughts before we move towards food for body. Would invite question one by one and we'll let the recipient answer. The forum is open for next 10 minutes. Any questions to any of us? Could we have the audience lights on, please, if possible, so that we could see? Please identify yourself. Yeah, they are putting a focus on.
Good day. I am TK Sinha, Career Group Club.
Could you just keep the mic near to your?
Is it okay? Is it okay?
Yes.
Good day. I am TK Sinha, Career Group Club. If I am allowed to recollect history, then we can see that Mahendra and Sanghamitra were sent to Ceylon. They actually maritime, they sent to Ceylon. Sanghamitra and Mahendra were sent to Ceylon by Ashoka. So this is not for the establishing kingdom there, just to reconnect with the people, reconnect with that country. But we know the history. If we recollect also the one Bengali poet, Amader Chele Bijoy Singho Lanka Korea Joy. There is one poetry like this. So I am not going for that. I only want to impress two things here. Just trade, religion, culture, whatever may be the area of activity for this reconnect, reimagine, we must actually take into the canvas the great characters of the artisans, peasantry, and the workers. If they are not involved, if it is restricted only amongst the elite class, only among the celebrities, then actually the fruitful activity will never happen, never take place.
Thank you so much, sir, for echoing what we just discussed in the last 45 minutes. Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, if any specific questions, of course, suggestions are always welcome.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, I've been trying to speak from the previous session. I'm Professor Srimati Mukherjee from Presidency University, and I teach in the Department of Performing Arts. Vis-a-vis what one of your speakers said about Indonesia being a Muslim country, yet there being pervasive Indian influence there. I mean, wayang kulit is a form of shadow theater that I think is still vibrant in Java, in parts of Java. And it now has a range of about 400-something characters, many of which are extrapolations from the original Mahabharata text. But what I really want to say is that Islam came to Indonesia, I think, in 1000 AD, if I'm not wrong. The period from 1st century AD to 1000 AD is the period of Indian influence, when missionaries and traders and intellectuals somehow, through trading, etc., went to Southeast Asia. Vishnu and Shiva were very important deities. Kings had constructed images, sculpture modeled on Shiva and Vishnu. So, and the Ramayana it was definitely, and also the Buddhist, the Panji cycle of stories. And
Very well said. Actually, I was trying to avoid the spiritual and the religious connection between India and the Indo-Pacific because it's a vast subject, but very rightly said. Just to a quick note on it, we need to learn the modern India, the new current generation needs to learn a lot from Indonesia, the way they have been able to separate and keep aside the religion, the culture and the lifestyle from each other. And all these three are very distinct in that part of Asia. So that's a beauty we all can learn from. Mr. Datta was, we'll take the last one.
It's not the last. I just want to make a very quick comment on to what Nilanthi said about having countries talk about our shared rivers. You would be happy to know that we have initiated a dialogue between the countries. It's been running for the third generation, third edition. We just finished last few months ago, called Nadi. So Nadi means rivers. Nadi also means our common pulse, the pulse of energy, culture, civilization, spirituality, all of that. And also it stands for natural allies in development and interdependence. So just to let you know that we have something going on that. That's all.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to ask one question?
Yes, we'll take this as the last question.
So I am Professor Shomojit Roy, again from Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research. It was a wonderful panel discussion. I just wanted to have your comment because right now we are slowly moving towards city-states and city civilizations because cities are becoming more important than the federal states, and the federal structure also embraces this very reality. How are we poised, or how you are thinking to capitalize on this and connect or increase the connectivity and mobility beyond the cities or in between the cities, which are contributing or going to contribute a major share and redefine the geopolitical and economic scenario or landscape of the world, if not of this region? Thank you very much.
I'll request Sifra to take this because you come from another very vibrant city called Bombay. No, sorry, Mumbai.
Yeah. That's an excellent question. It's a reality that cities are the powerhouses and engines for growth. I mean, there's no two words about it. And a city like Mumbai, I'm sure like Calcutta and Delhi, we have a big metropolitan region around it. Bombay or Mumbai is no longer an island city. It's a city that whose influence sort of it's not just a metropolitan region, but goes even beyond that. It's a reality that cities are here to stay. I mean, we'd like the hinterlands also to grow at the same space. And I think there is a great amount of change in the last 10 years in terms of connectivity, in terms of digital, in terms of telecommunications, even with the hinterland connect. But geopolitically and on the global stage, I think cities are going to be playing a very, very important role. Because even at the COP, you always have the cities, even at G20, the cities are represented. And speaking for Mumbai, we have been at Gateway House, we've been pitching for an empowered mayor. Because what happens is that our chief minister speaks for the city. We need to have our mayor, who is actually the head of the richest municipality in India, to really be out there on these kind of forums to speak for Mumbai. So, I mean, I can't speak for Kolkata, I don't know what the situation is, but for Mumbai, I know that we are pitching for an empowered mayor, just like the American mayors and in other countries which they have.
Thank you so much. Quick, should we? Let's let the audience decide. It's 1:48. Okay, please. Yes, ma'am. Could you just...
there should, this is Meenakshi Mishra, Director ICCR. I just wanted to make a small suggestion regarding this Bali Jatra. When we plan to have the cultural exchanges during this period, I must share that this is a big trade fair. Okay, at the moment, the traders from all over the country is participating in this trade fair. Why not inviting the participation to make it an international trade fair? Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful suggestion. I think it was a very clear conversation and very easy flow of ideas. We tried to do Samudra Manthan of thoughts in as much clarity as possible. Lots of initiatives and lots of skills, lots of opportunities and possibilities have been discussed about how we can reimagine. I would conclude and pass it on the microphone to Sadhanaji with one last note and request to especially the scholars, the young generation back there. Now we will end up for,
excuse me.
we will break, we will, yes, somebody from the audience?
Yes. Here I am.
We could discuss one-on-one over lunch.
No, actually, all of the representatives are there. So I had a suggestion.
Your good name, please?
My name is Nilanthi Chaudhary. I'm a software engineer. But the suggestion is absolutely different from my subject. That is, all these island nations have their own indigenous technique of development of textile. We have said the dance drama was there about textile, and India's technique of textile development and creating textile is well known. But there are some forms of textile development using natural dyes are there in every country. For example, batik has come from Indonesia itself. Recently, I was reading about shibori of Japan. Only one very elderly expert is left. So the people who are proficient in these techniques are washing away. So I somehow forced my talk.
Very well noted point, ma'am.
And this should be.
Textile Connect is, of course, a very important topic we need to think about, and we should and we will. So, henceforth, whenever you eat an Indian delicacy, please try to go into the history and the roots of it, and 90% of Indian cuisine has some cross-cultural connect. So, with that, bon appetit.